Welcome to Metric Hub. Today I'm going to focus on the revision, test revision, March test revision, Right, so I'm going to revise the March test revision for business studies, grade 12. Right, so this paper was written last year, March in KwaZulu-Natal province, right, in KwaZulu-Natal province. So I'm going to revise the March 2025 test. What we call a common assessment task, grade 12, business studies. Right. So those ones who are coming for the first time, who have just joined us, please do not forget to hit the subscription button. Do not forget to comment. Any questions? Please write them on the comment section. I will attend to them. Right. So I'm going straight to question one. I'm going to question one. Right. So question one is section A. And it's compulsory. I mean to say you're supposed to answer all questions. You're supposed to answer all questions. In section A. So let's go to question one. Right. That's 1 point. Question one. Various options are provided as possible answers to the following questions. Choose the answer and write only the letter A to D next to the question number 1.11 to 1.115 in the answer book, right? For example, 1.16D, right? So here we're going to write the question number, and then we write the answer, right? So question 1.11, the dash provide accreditation for skills development facilitators, right? Remember the Skills Development Act, which is the SDA, right? They get accreditations from the SETAs, which is the sector education and training authorities, right? SETA is sector education and training authorities. So that's where they get accreditation for skills development. Right? SETA, education and training authorities. Right. So the S is the S, right? Authorities, right? So let's talk about learnership, right? Learnership is just a program. It's a program that provides practical and theory, right? Whilst a person is on the job. Learnership is a program that provides practical and theory learning whilst an employee is at the job or while employed. Learnership. You can go and do your practicals and your theories whilst you are working. Right. Let's talk about penalties. Right. Penalties are fines. Right. There are fines charged for non-compliance. Right. That's what you call penalties. Right. Human resource development strategy is a strategy to develop employees within an employee. It's a strategy to develop employees within an organization. Right. So let's go to question 1.12. Meet services, identify vacancies, and attract suitable candidates, right? They identify vacancies, and then they attract suitable candidates, right? So that's what you call recruitment, right? So recruitment is just a process, is defined as a process of attracting and identifying the best candidate to fill in a vacant position, right? To fill in a vacant position. That's what you call recruitment. Right, let's talk about selection. Selection is the process of eliminating. It's the process of eliminating. It is a process of eliminating candidates or applicants who do not meet the job requirement. Who do not meet the job requirements. That's what you call selection. Right? They're eliminating candidates who do not meet the job requirements, right? And then placement, right? Placement is a process of is a process of placing the best candidate for the vacant position. When you're placing that best candidate that was chosen, right, for the vacant position, that's what you call placing, right? Induction, you can find that it is a process of welcoming. It is a process of welcoming the chosen candidate to the organization, When you're welcoming that candidate who was chosen for that position, that's what you call induction. It is a process of welcoming and also receiving. It's a process of welcoming and receiving the candidate, right? Once the candidate has been given an appointment letter or an employment offer, the induction begins, whereby a mentor is chosen who will welcome and receive the candidate within the organization, right? Let's go to question. So the answer is recruitment on 1.12. Let's go to question 1.13. Using fine print to conceal important information is an example of, right? It cannot be an example of a pricing, no. Right? It's not an example of a taxation, no. It's not an example of polluting the environment. And then the right answer is unfair advertising. When we are concealing, meaning to say you're trying to hide, right, important information, right, so that you manipulate the customers so that they can buy the product, right? Let's move on to 1.14. Situlele engineers applied brainstorming as a problem-solving technique, which is what you call brainstorming, whereby people, they come together, they share ideas, they share aspirations, they also share suggestions, right? That's what you call brainstorming, right? So it is when using each suggestions when using each suggestion to inspire new ideas. That's what you call brainstorming. Brainstorming, right? So let's move on to 1.15. For the overtime worked on weekdays and Saturdays. Techno printers employees must be compensated as follows. They're supposed to be given a double salaries on a Sunday or on a public holiday. Sundays and public holidays. Sundays and public holidays. An employee is supposed to be given a double salary. Double salary is on a Sunday, should be given on a Sunday and on public holidays, right? Paid for 10 hours per week. That's an overtime money, of overtime pay, right? Should not exceed more than 10 hours. Overtime pay, overtime must not exceed 10 hours per week, right? And then let's go to option C, 1.5 times the normal rate of pay. That's the correct answer, right? Weekdays, overtime and weekdays are supposed to be 1.5 times the normal rate of pay, right? And then triple the normal rate of pay. That's a wrong answer. Wrong, right? It's very wrong, right? Does not apply, right? So let's move on to question, the next question. Let's go to the next question, which is question 2. Question 2. Choose a description from column B that matches a term in column A. Right, write only the letter A to J next to the question number. Right. So let's go to 1.21. Right. National Skills Development Strategy. All right. So you can find that this strategy is there to develop skills through training and development of employees, right? So let's go and check the correct answer, right? So the correct answer is increase access to programs that train people, right? It's a strategy to increase access to programs. That's a strategy, right? So let's move on to option A, a written description of the job and its requirements. That's what you call a job description. A job description. A job description. That's a job description, right? And then access to clean water. I think it's all about healthy and safety. Healthy, right? Conditions, right? Here it's all about national skills development strategy, and then eliminates discrimination on ground of gender, race, disability, right? In the workplace, right? We are talking about another technique, which is a strategy which eliminates discrimination on grounds of that's what you call employment equity, right? Employment Equity Act. Employment Equity Act. It eliminates Employment Equity Act. It eliminates discrimination. No one is supposed to be discriminated due to gender, race, disability in the workplace. All right. To summarize the responses from the experts in a feedback report, that's what you call a daily technique, a Delphi technique, right? Right. Promotes collective bargaining at the workplace, right? Promotes collective bargaining at the workplace, right? We have the Labor Relations Act, right? Of 1995, number 66, right? Written description of specific skills, experience needed for the job. That's what you call a job specification. Job specification, a written description of the skills, experiences needed for the job. That's what you call job specification. Job specification, right? And then reasonable limitations of working hours, right? It's also the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, basic conditions. It talks about the working hours, Conditions of Employment Act. It talks about the working hours, right? And then choose the force with the highest score, the situation, improve supply of skills, right? Which improves supply of skills? That's the Skills Development Act, right? So let's go to the answers to the question, right? A job description is A, right? And then Dofi technique, which is E, right? 1.2.5 Labor Relations Act promotes collective bargaining at the workplace, right? Economic rights, it's like I can't find the correct answer which can describe the economic rights. I think economic rights is the rights to be to basic salaries, rights to a permanent position at work, right? Rights to be compensated at work, right? I think that's something around that clock, right? So let's move on to section B, whereby you are supposed to answer any two questions, right? So I'm just going to pick two questions from section B. Right? So let's go to question 2, business environments. Right. So 2.1, 2.1, name any two types of leaves stipulated in the Basic Conditions of Employment Act of 1995, right? There is what you call maternity leave for those ones who are pregnant. There is what you call maternity leave, right? When you are pregnant, they will give you at least 2 weeks, 2 months before and 2 months after the birth, right? We also have what you call paternity leave, or what you call parental paternity leave, right? Paternity leave, normally it's a leave for the father, right? When the wife or the mother gave birth, you'll be given leave, ne? All right, which is what you call paternity leave, right? And then we also have another one, which is there's also sick leave when one is sick, annual leave, right? An employee is entitled to an annual leave, right? Per year, there are days entitlement for annual leave per year, right? Which is what you call annual per year. Each year, an employee is entitled to a leave days. That's what you call annual leave days, right? And lastly, we have what you call family responsibility leave, right? Is granted to an employee when maybe a close family member passes on, right? If a family member dies, an employee is requested to bring a death certificate as a proof, right? For this leave, right? Let's move on to 2.2. 2.2. Outline ways in which businesses can comply with the Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Diseases Act, right? Right. When we're talking about compensation for injuries and occupational injuries and disease act, we're talking about employees being compensated if they are injured or die at work, while they are working, when they are injured or when an employee dies at work. Thus, compensation for occupational and injury act, right? It's all about compensating employees for injuries, right, and death occurred at work, right? Meaning to say it does not compensate for employee who has been injured outside the working environment, right? So let's talk about let's go to the question, right? We're supposed to outline ways in which a business can comply with the Compensation Act, Compensation for Occupational Act, right? We are going to list ways in which a business can comply with this act, right? Compliance, right? 1, 2.2, 2.2, right? The business should provide a healthy, it should provide a healthy and safe environment. Should provide a healthy and safe environment for employees. Supposed to provide a healthy and safe environment for employees, an environment which is free from danger, right? Right. And also, the businesses to ensure that the equipment and machines are working, right, are in good working condition, right? They're supposed to ensure that equipment and machines are in good working order. They're supposed to be in good working order, right? Good working condition. They're supposed to ensure that the equipments are in good working conditions. And also, they're supposed to register with the Compensation Commissioner. The businesses to register with the Compensation Commissioner. The businesses to register. And also, they're supposed to provide particulars. They're supposed to provide the particulars of the business. The business has to register and provide particulars of the business. Right. The business has to report incidents. The business has to report all incidents causing death and illness in the workplace. Causing death and illness. They're supposed to make sure that they register incidents, right? The business must pay levy, right? Pay levy. Levies must be paid, right, to the compensation fund. They're supposed to pay levy to the compensation fund. They're supposed to pay levy to the compensation fund, right? The business also has to, they're supposed to keep records of employees' income and details of work for 4 years, right? They're supposed to make sure that they keep records keep records of employees' income, right, and details of work. They're supposed to make sure that they keep details of employees' income and details of work for 4 years. For 4 years, right? Even if the employee leave the organization, they're supposed to make sure that they keep that information for 4 years, right? Let's move on to question 2.3. 2.3, right? Read the scenario below and answer the questions that follows. Bobby Technology, BT. Bobby Technology manufacturers advanced mining equipment. BT has recently appointed Black people in managerial positions. They are also planning to sell some shares to Black employees, people. Right? Identify the act that is applicable to BT. BT is applying what you call a broad-based Black empowerment, Black Empowerment Act. Black Empowerment Act, right? Which is what you call the BBBEA, triple BEA, right? So this act is on of what? 2013 amended 2003 amended 2013, right? Right. So reason being that it has appointed the Black people in managerial positions. It also wants to sell or plan to sell shares to Black people. That's what you call the application of the act that is being applied here is the BBBEA, Broad-Based Black Empowerment Act, right? Explain the impact of the act identified above on business, right? This will explain the impact of the BBBEE, right? So it's supposed to be Black, broad Black, sort of broad-based Black empowerment, economic empowerment, which is the right, the BBBEEA, right? The Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act, right? So let's move on to the impact of this act, the impact of the BBBEE Act, right? We can find that it encourages business to address the demands for equity. It encourages businesses to address, it encourages businesses to address the demands for equity. Right. It also provides for human resource development. It provides for human resource resources development through training and development, through training and development. Right. This act promotes enterprise development. It promotes enterprise development. It promotes enterprise development. All right. How? By developing entrepreneurial skills. By developing entrepreneurial skills. All right. You can find that share prices of BBBEE compliant business are likely to increase as they attract more business. You can find that the share prices of the broad basic Black economic empowerment, right? Compliant are likely to increase, right, as they attract more businesses, more business. The shares can increase, right? Right. And you can find that business that supports more micro, medium enterprises may increase their own BBBEE ratings. Those are business that supports or promotes businesses that promotes or support that supports small, micro and medium enterprises. You can find that these businesses may increase their own BBBEE ratings. Right. Okay, let's move on to question 2.4. 2.4, discuss the purpose of Skills Development Act 1998, Act of 45 of 1998. Right. Skills Development Act. Skills Development Act. Right. The purpose of the Skills Development Act. The purpose of the Skills Development Act 2.4. 2.4. The purpose of the Skills Development Act SDA, right? Right. The Act wanted to develop the skills of the South African workforce. Right. Another purpose was to increase investment in education and training. They wanted to increase investment, right, in education, and training, right. It also wanted to encourage workers to participate in learnership. Wanted to encourage workers to participate in learnership. Right, and training programs. They wanted to encourage employees or workers to participate in learnership and in training programs in order to improve skills. It also wanted to promote the employment prospects. It wanted to promote the employment prospects of employees. Wanted to promote the employment prospects of disadvantaged groups, of historically disadvantaged groups. We call them designated groups, talking about the blacks, the coloreds, the Indians, right? And also it wanted to ensure quality education that is globally competitive. It wanted to ensure quality education that is globally competitive. Right. So these are the purposes of the what? Of Skills Development Act SDA, right? To develop the skills of South African workers, to increase investments in education and training. It also wanted to encourage workers to participate in learnership programs and in trainings to promote the employment prospects of the historically disadvantaged people, right? We're talking about the blacks, the coloreds, and the Indians. Even the disabled people, right? Disabled. Right. It also wanted to promote quality or to ensure quality in education, which is competitive, globally competitive, right? Okay, let's move on to the next question. Advise businesses on actions regarded as non-compliance by the Consumer Protection Act. right? Actions that can be regarded as non-compliance according to the Consumer Protection Act, right? 1, denying customers proper information. Denying customers proper information about the product or about the service, right? It's regarded as non-compliance. Treating workers differently based on gender. Treating customers differently based on gender is considered non-compliance. Right, or race. Right. Charging unfair prices for the same product. Charging unfair prices for the same product and services is regarded as actions which are non-compliant. When you charge the same product differently, right? And lastly, varying the quality of goods when selling in different areas. Varying the quality of goods or services when selling in different areas. We're talking about a process whereby markets are different. The quality of products depends on the markets, right? Or the customers, types of customers, right? In hyper suburbs, high density locations, they might sell quality, while in uh, low density, right? They sell poor products, poor quality products, right? So that's action which is regarded, these are the actions regarded as non-compliance, non-compliance, right? Let's move on to question 3. Question 3, right? Right. Answer, sorry, question 3, which is business operations, right? 3.1, state any 2 sources of internal recruitment, right? I'm going to state sources of internal recruitment, right? Internal recruitment is all about, right? It is through promotion, when you are promoting an individual, right? When you are promoting an employee to a higher position, that's what you call internal, which is recruitment within an organization. It is recruitment within an organization. Recruitment within an organization, right? It is done through promotion. Promotion, for example, a general employee will be promoted or is promoted to a supervisor position, right, which is vacant. That's what we call internal recruitment, right? So let's discuss sources of internal recruitment. Sources of internal recruitment, right? 1 can be word of mouth, whereby a manager will tell employees who are potential for promotion to apply, right, for the position. They can put that information on the notice board. Management can use the notice board to advertise, right? They can also use internal bulletin to inform employees of a vacant. They can also use internal emails, right? Company emails, right? To advertise posts, right? As well as business letters and magazines. We have newsletters and magazine, right? They can get recommendation by current employee. I can recommend someone, right, to the management for a position, right? Right. So let's move on to question 3.2. Outline the reasons for termination of employment contract. Right. There are so many reasons. It might be due to retrenchment. The employer is bankrupt. He cannot afford to employ. Employees, you can retrench them, right? It might be due to misconduct. An employee had a misconduct, right? It might be due to employees resigning, right? An employee might decide to resign voluntarily, might decide to leave, right? It might be by mutual agreement, whereby they both agree that let's terminate the contract of employment, right? Right. It might be due to maybe the contract is expired. Contract expired, or when it comes to an end. It might due to redundant, whereby the employee is no longer needed by the employer. Maybe these services might no longer be needed. It might be due to incapability, whereby the employer is no longer capable, right? Due to maybe sickness or illness. It might be due to death, when an employer dies. The contract will be terminated with immediate effect, right? So let's move on to question 3.3. Discuss the role of interviewer during the interview. The role of the interviewer. Remember, you should know the difference between an interviewer and the interviewee, right? Right. An interviewer is a person who is interviewing the applicant. A person who is interviewing the applicant, that's what you call the what? The interviewer. The interviewer, right? So the interviewee is that person who is being interviewed, right? So let's answer the questions. The role, the question, the role of the what? Roles of the interviewer. Interviewer, right? Is supposed to allocate the same amount of time for each candidate. Supposed to allocate the same amount of time for each applicant or candidate, right? Is supposed to introduce members of the panel, if there are any. Supposed to introduce members of the panel to the applicant, to the applicant. Supposed to introduce, right? 3 is supposed to make the interviewee feel at easy. Supposed to make the interviewee supposed to make sure that he feel easy. It's supposed to create a relaxed atmosphere. Right? He's supposed to make sure that he create a what? A relaxed atmosphere. Right? He's supposed to explain the purpose of the interview. Supposed to explain the purpose. The purpose of the interview. What is the purpose? What do they want to achieve of the interview? The interviewer has to make sure that he avoids discriminatory types of questions. Supposed to avoid discriminatory type of questions. Right. It's supposed to provide opportunity for the applicant to ask questions. Supposed to provide opportunities for the applicant to ask questions. And lastly, is supposed to record the responses. Right? He's supposed to record the interviewee responses. Right. So these are the roles of the interviewer. These are the roles of the interviewer. Right. So let's move on to question 3.4. Question 3.4. Question 3.4. Right. Read the scenario. Read the scenario. Right. Read the scenario below and answer the questions that follows. Shabir Manufacturing, SM. Shabir Manufacturing produces gas cylinders. Recently, the business has listed the purpose of induction as communication of information about the products or services offered by the business, communication of psychographic test to be conducted as soon on the new employee, communication of business policies regarding ethical, professional conduct, conditions of employment, etc. Right. Let's go to question 3.41. Quote two purposes of induction applicable to SM. Right. The purposes. These are the purposes. Right? The purposes. Right. One, communication of information about the products, services offered by the business. Two, is also another purpose. Communication of psychographic test to be conducted soon on the new employee. That's also another purpose. Communication of business policies regarding ethical and professional conducts, conditions of employment, etc. Right. So these are the purposes according to SM. Chabri Manufacturing. Right. Let's go to 3.4. Explain the benefits of induction to SM. Right. 3.4. True. Right. What are the benefits of induction? Benefits of induction? Right. These include, right, to allow the new employee to settle, quickly, right? To settle in quickly, right? And also to make the new employee feel at ease, make him feel at ease, right? And also to meet the expectations of the employee, as well as to increase the quality of performance, to increase the quality of performance through induction program. The employee might be able to perform well, right? And also to minimize accidents, right? Another benefit is to meet the employees' expectations, And lastly, to ensure that the employee becomes productive as soon as possible. Make sure that the employee becomes productive as soon as possible. Right. These are the benefits of induction. The benefits of induction. Right, let's go to 4.5. 4.5. Right. Question 3.5. 3.5. Advise businesses on the importance of training or skills development in human resource management. Right. So why is it important to train employees? One, employees feel valid when they are receiving training. Employees feel valid. They feel that they are valid and also they are part of the organization, right? The employees increases production. So productivity increased when employees are trained. Productivity increases, as well as quality performance, right? You can find that training programs allows employees to strengthen employees' skills to be strengthened. It allows employees to strengthen their skills, right? Right. And also you can find that ongoing training can encourages creativity within the organization. Employees becomes creative, right? And lastly, it enables employees to perform well. They'll be able to perform well, right, in their job. Employees will be able to perform well in their job, right? So these are the what? These are the importance. They feel valid, right? They feel part of the organization when they receive training. And then you can find that productivity increases. It helps to strengthen their skills. It encourages creativity within an organization. And also employees are able to perform well in their jobs. Because these are the advantages of training or skills development, right? Let's move on to the next question. Let's move on to the next question, which is miscellaneous. Miscellaneous. We need to answer at least 2 questions, right? So let's move on to business operation. We're still on business operation, right? Name 2 aspects that should be added in an employment contract, right? An employment contract, it is an agreement between the employee and the employer, right? That the employee will offer his services, right, under supervision and guidance, right, by the employee, by the employer, and you receive compensation, right? Employment contract. An employment contract. Is it it is it refers to a mutual agreement between the employer and employee, right? It's a mutual agreement between the employer and the employee, right? Agreement on that the employer, so the employee will offer his services, will offer his services under the supervision and control of the employer, of the employer, of the employer, and in return, you will receive compensation, which is what we call pay, right? That's an employment contract, all right? So let's go to the question, aspects. Aspects included in the employment contract, two aspects. Aspects included, aspects included in the employment contract. One, the personal details of the employee. Two, you'll find that there are details of the business, all right, such as the name and the address, e.g. the name and the address of the business, right. Three, the job description. Four, job specification. Five, the benefits that the employee will receive. Six, the compensation. How much is the employee going to earn per month? Leave days. Also have probation period is listed on the contract of employment, as well as the employee deductions. We're talking about UIF and pension fund and other deductions. All right. It also consists of hours of work, place where the employee will spend most of his working time, the date of employment, commencement of employment. It also consists of the duration of employment contract, expiry date, termination, etc. Right. List of documents that form part of the contract, such as the appointment letter, the code of conduct. Right. So these are the details that you can find on the Employment Act. Right. So let's go to 4.2. Read the scenario below and answer the question. Right. So Smile Restaurant, SR. Smile Restaurant is looking for the head chief for its Durban-based restaurant. The manager at SR used the networking skills to attract the most suitable candidate. Right. Question 4.21. Identify the type of recruitment used by SR. This is what you call an external recruitment. An external recruitment. right? Because he's using networking skills to attract most candidate. That's an external. An external is recruiting from the outside the organization, right? Is recruiting from the outside, outside the organization, right? That's what you call external source of recruitment, right? So let's go to 4.22, discuss the impact of the type of recruitment identified in 4.2.1, which is external. So I'm going to discuss the impact of the external recruitment. Remember, when you are asked to discuss the impact, right, make sure that you understand that you need to include the advantages and disadvantages, right? So impact of external recruitment, right? You can find that new candidates who bring new talents. The organization is going to gain new candidates, new employees who bring new talents, new skills, experiences, right? Two, there is a large pool of labor in the outside, in the external, a large pool of labor. There's a large pool of labor. There are many people, right, to choose from. Labor. When you're talking about a pool of labor, we're talking about people who have the right qualification, right, for the job, right? People or candidates who have the right qualification for the job. That's what you call pool. So there is a large pool of labor to choose from, unlike internal, right? And you can find that it minimizes conflict amongst the current employees, right? Reduction of conflict, reduction of conflict amongst current employees, right? Right. Number 4, we can find that the organization will be able to acquire a candidate who is suitable for the job, who has the right skills, the right qualifications and competency, right? Who does not need to be trained, right? So there will be training and development costs, training and development costs are reduced, right? There's a reduction in the cost, right? And then you can find that the organization may be able to meet affirmative action and BBBEE targets, right? It helps the business to meet affirmative action and BBBEE targets, right? Yes. Let's talk about the negative impact of the external recruitment. This one we're talking about the positive impact. Talking about the positive. So let's discuss the negative impact. The negative impact of the external recruitment. Right, you can find that information on CVs may not be reliable. Information on references may not be reliable. Right, you can find that new candidates generally take longer to adjust. They take longer to adjust to the organization. And you can find that those new candidates might dilute the culture of the organization. Dilution of the culture of the organization. The culture of the organization will be diluted. And also the new candidate might not fit in. Might fail to fit in. In the culture of the organization. Right. In the culture of the organization. Right. And lastly, it is cost effective. Recruitment might take longer and is more expensive. Recruitment might take longer and it might be more expensive for the organization. Might be more expensive for the organization, which is a disadvantage. Right, let's move on to question 4. We are still on question 4 on business roles. Right. List any 2 problem-solving steps. Right. 2. Right. So I'm going to list all of them. Right. Problem-solving steps. Problem-solving steps. Problem-solving steps. So there are 8 steps. There are 8 steps. Right. The first step is to you need to identify the problem. Identify the problem. Identify the problem. What is the problem? You need to identify the problem. Right. Once you've done that, go to step number 2, whereby you define the problem. Right. You define the problem. Right. Mean to say we have confirmed the problem. Right. The problem. And then step number 3, that's when you identify possible solution. You need to identify possible solutions to solve the problem. And then you evaluate alternative solutions. Evaluate those solutions. You weigh them. You evaluate the alternative. Solution. Right. And then number 5, you choose or you select the solution. Once you have selected the solution, you develop an action plan. Once you develop an action plan, you then implement the plan, the action, and then lastly, you monitor. The implementation of the solution. You monitor the implementation of the solution. Right. Right. And lastly, you evaluate the implemented solution. You evaluate the implemented, right, the implemented solution. That's the last step. So here the question requests you to just list two. Just list two. Right. 2 problem-solving steps. Right, let's move on to question 4.4, discuss the application of the force field analysis as a problem-solving technique. Right, so the force field analysis, describe the current situation or the problem and the desired situation, right? So here they list all driving forces or restraining or cones that will support and resist change. Once it is done, they have to allocate a score to each force using a numerical scale where 1 is weak and 5 is the strongest, right? And then they will then have to weigh up the positive and negatives, then decide if the project is viable. They choose the force with the highest score as the solution. Get that? Right. So here, if the project is visible, you need to find ways to increase the forces for change, and then you identify priorities and develop action plan. Right. So you understand here, right? The first thing is they need to describe the current situation, the current problem. What is the problem, right? Right. And the desired situation, right? What do they want to which situation do they want to desire, right? They list the driving forces, which is the pros and the cons, right? That will support or resist that change. They have to allocate a score to each force using a numerical scale where 1 is the weak and the 5 is the strong, right? Then they weigh up the positive and the negative. Then they have to decide if the project is viable, right? Once they've done that, they need to choose the force with the highest score as the solution, right? So if the project is viable, for example, for instance, you need to find ways to increase the forces for change. Then you need to identify priorities and develop an action plan. Right. So let's go to 4.5. Advise businesses on the ways in which businesses can create an environment that stimulates or promotes creative thinking, right? So let's advise businesses, right, on ways to create or stimulate or promote creative thinking. Creative thinking, right? One, you're supposed to place suggestion boxes. You need to place suggestion boxes, right? Right. Around the workplace and keeping communication channels open for new ideas. You need to train staff, train staff in innovative techniques. The organization is to train staff members in innovative techniques, right? The organization is also has to encourage employees to develop, right, a new, unique ideas. You need to encourage them to develop new ideas, encouraging to develop new ideas, right? The organization has to reward innovation and creativity, right? Right. By offering maybe a reward scheme, right? Right. They're supposed to make time for brainstorming. The organization is to make time for brainstorming. Sessions. Make time for brainstorming sessions to generate new ideas, right? Right. So right, let's move on to the next question. Right. Right. Answer any one question from this section. Right. Answer any one question from this section. Right. So here, you're supposed to write an essay on the National Credit Act in which you include the following aspects, right? So question 5, right? Business environments, right? Credit providers must analyze the purpose of the National Credit Act, 2005 Act 34 of 1995 before granting any credit, as well as the consumer rights in terms of this act. It is also important for businesses to assess the impact of National Credit Act on their operations. Compliance with National Credit Act is compulsory for all credit providers. Write an essay on the National Credit Act in which you include the following: outline the purpose of the National Credit Act. All right. So you are supposed to write an essay. Write an essay. Write an essay. Right. You are already given the heading, and you are supposed to write the essay. Right. So when you're writing an essay, you need to include the introduction. Right. So on your introduction, you're supposed to tell us about the act. The act. Tell us about the act. Write about the act. About the act. Right. Right. So you can write like the act was introduced to promote consumers in the credit market and to make credit services more accessible. Right. Business should always ensure that the rights of consumers are protected to maintain a good business image. Right. Right. Businesses must maybe explore various ways to comply with the requirements of the Act. The Act has a positive and negative impact on both the client and the business. Right. So the next thing that you're going to write is about the purpose. This is the introduction. And then number 2, the purpose of the Act. The purpose of the Act. Of the Act. Right. So the purpose of the National Credit Act. The purpose of the National Credit Act is to, 1, to promote a fair, competitive credit market, Another purpose of the Act is to make provisions for the establishment of national credit regulators. Make provision for national credit regulators, which is the NCR, right? It also wanted to ensure that customers know what is included in their credit contracts. On their credit contracts. Right. It also wanted to ensure registrations of credit bureau and debt cancelling services. To ensure registration of credit bureaus. Right. It also wanted to prevent discrimination and ensure credit availability to all customers. They wanted to ensure that there's no discrimination when it comes to credit. Right. 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 Preventing discrimination and ensuring credit is available to um, all consumers. That everyone is can and have access to credit, right? So the next point is you need to explain the consumer right as stipulated in the National Credit Act, right? The consumer right, the customer and the consumer is the right to consumer right. The customer is the right to apply. Number three, consumer right. The customer is the right to apply for credit. The customer is the right to apply for credit and free from discrimination. Supposed to has a right to receive information in plain. The right to receive information in plain and understandable language. In understandable language. He has that right to receive information in his language so that he can understand the message. So he has a right to receive documents as required by the Act. He has a right to receive documents. Is required by the Act. Right. Is a right to obtain reasons for. There's a right to obtain reason for the reasons for credit being refused. He also has a right to a fair and responsible marketing. A fair and reasonable marketing. Right. There's a right to return goods to the credit provider. There's a right to return goods. There's a right to return goods to credit provider. Right. He also has the right to apply for a debt review. He has the right to apply for debt review. You see, these are the rights. Suppose he has also right to receive protection from their personal information. Their personal information. They have a right to protection of their personal information. Right. 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 Let's move on to the last one. Right. So I discussed the impact of the National Credit Act on businesses. The impact on National Credit Act. Right. Yeah, one you can find that we have the positive impact. The positive impact. Right. Impact of the National Credit Act, right? Right. We have the positive impact, right? And find that one, lower debt, it lowers debt bad debts, it lowers bad debts. Resulting in better cash flow. It protects businesses against non-paying consumers. Protect the business against non-paying consumers. Right. It is authorized credit providers, meaning to say they may attract many or more consumers. Authorized credit providers. Right, they may attract more consumers. Right. Then last one, it prevents reckless lending and prevents business from bankrupt. Prevents reckless lending. Prevents reckless lending. And prevent businesses from bankrupt. Prevent business from bankrupt, right? So let's discuss the negative impact of the National Credit Act, the negative impact, right? You can find that businesses can no longer carry out credit marketing. You can find that businesses struggle to get credit, such as bank loans. Businesses that do not comply with the National Credit Act may face legal action. You can find that debt collection procedures that are more complex and expensive. You can find that fewer customers buy on credit as it is more difficult to obtain credit. Right, you can find that it increases the admission burden on credit providers, like for example, paperwork is needed, right? And then you can find that the business need to appoint additional staff to deal with the extra administration. And then you can also find that the businesses need to appoint additional, as I was talking about, and then they should the credit agreement be declared reckless, the business can fortify the outstanding debt on the goods, which is also a loss to the business, right? Businesses that are official credit providers, they must submit a compliance report every year, which is also a cost to the organization, right? So these are the negative impact, right? So let's talk about ways suggest ways in which businesses can comply with the National Credit Act. Ways they're supposed to make sure that they offer applicants pre-agreement statements. They're supposed to disclose all costs of loans. No hidden costs should be charged, right? They are supposed to obtain credit records, checks of clients before granting loans. The business should be registered with the National Credit regulator. And then you can find that it's supposed to submit an annual compliance report to the National Credit Regulator, right? And also they're supposed to conduct credit check with a registered credit bureau and consult with National Credit Register, right? These are the ways in which a business can comply with the National Credit Act, right? Right. Thank you so much for your time. Let's meet again. All right. I'll be discussing question 6. Let's meet again, right, in the next video, whereby I'll be answering question 6, business roles, which is ethics and professionalism. Thank you so much. Those who did not subscribe, please subscribe so that you can be notified whenever I post a video. Thank you so much, guys. Wish you the best in your test. Remember, the test contributes to the final exam. So make sure that you maximize marks on this test. You maximize marks on the test so that you will work less in the exam. Thank you so much for your time. Have a good day.